After studying this module, you shall be able to understand the non-collusive Chamberlain model, where the firms are conscious of their interdependence. You will also be able to evaluate the Chamberlain model critically on various grounds. You will be able to analyze concept of kinked demand curve as a tool for the determination of the equilibrium in oligopolistic markets, and also identify the various criticisms of the kinked demand curve model. Let us understand about oligopoly market structure. Oligopoly is an industry structure characterized by a few large firms producing most or all of the output of some product. Examples include automobiles, steel, electrical equipment industries, etc. The characteristic of oligopoly that distinguishes it from other forms of market structures is the mutual interdependence of firms in the industry. Because there are only a few firms, each realizes its actions will affect its rivals. Therefore, any price or output decision a firm makes must be made with the thought of its rivals in mind and with some sort of guess about how rivals will respond. Since firms can never be sure how rivals will react, they will make decisions in the presence of uncertainty. The nature of an oligopolistic industry makes it impossible for economists to develop a single model that is applicable to all industries exhibiting oligopolistic characteristics. Instead, economists have developed several theories of oligopoly, each with different behavioral assumptions about how an oligopolist believes its rivals will react and how they actually do react. The implications of these models vary since the assumptions made about the rival behavior differ, and when the assumptions vary, more outcomes become possible. Oligopoly models have been broadly distinguished as non-collusive models of Cournot, Bertrand, Stackelberg, Chamberlain, Sweezy, and collusive models like cartels, price leadership, etc. Non-collusive oligopoly is a market where firms work independently and strategically by recognizing the mutual interdependence, whereas collusive oligopoly is one where firms maximize their joint profits by entering into a collusive agreement to restrict competition and to avoid uncertainties arising from oligopolistic interdependence. In continuation with the previous module, this module looks at the non-collusive oligopoly models, namely Chamberlain oligopoly model and Sweezy's kinked demand model. Now we will discuss about Chamberlain's oligopoly model. According to the Chamberlain theory of oligopoly, a stable equilibrium can be reached with the monopoly price being charged by all firms if firms recognize their interdependence and act so as to maximize the industry profit, that is monopoly profit. Chamberlain accepts that if firms do not recognize their interdependence, the industry will reach either the Cournot equilibrium if each firm acts independently on the assumption that the rivals will keep their output constant, or the industry will reach the Bertrand equilibrium if each firm acts independently, trying to maximize its own profit on the assumption that the other rivals will keep their price unchanged. Now we will discuss how Chamberlain's theory differs from other. Chamberlain's theory differs with the assumption of independent action by competitors. According to him, in contrast to the Bertrand and Cournot assumption, the firms do in fact recognize their interdependence. When changing their price and output, the firms do recognize the direct and indirect effects of their decisions. The direct effects are those which would occur if competitors were assumed to remain passive. The indirect effects are those which result from the fact that rivals do not in fact remain passive but react to the decisions of the firm which changes its prices or output. The recognition of the full effects, direct and indirect, of a change in the firm's output or price results in a stable industry equilibrium with the monopoly price and monopoly output. Chamberlain assumes that the monopoly solution with industry or joint profits being maximized can be achieved without collusion. The entrepreneurs are assumed to be intelligent enough to quickly recognize their interdependence, learn from their past mistakes, and adopt the best for all position, which is charging the monopoly price. Consider a straight line market demand with a negative slope. Assume that the production is costless. If firm A is first to start production, it will produce the profit maximizing output OXM and sell it at the monopoly price PM as shown in figure. Firm B, under the Cournot assumption that the rival firm A will retain his quantity unchanged, considers that its demand curve is CD and will attempt to maximize its profit by producing 1/2 of this demand, that is quantity XMB, at which firm B's MR is equal to MC, which is equal to 0. As a consequence, the total industry output is OB and the price falls to P. Now firm A realizes that its rival does in fact react to its actions, and taking that into account decides to reduce its output to OA, which is 1/2 of OXM and equal to B's output. The industry output is thus OXM and price rises to the monopoly level OPM. Firm B realizes that this is the best for both of them and so will keep its output the same at XMB equal to AXM. Thus, by recognizing their interdependence, the firms reach the monopoly solution. Under the assumption of zero cost, the market will be shared equally between A and B, that is OA equal to AXM. Coming on to the critical evaluation of oligopoly. Chamberlains' model is an advance over the previous models, that is Bertrand and Cournot, in that it assumes that the firms are sophisticated enough to realize their interdependence. Their behavior leads them to the monopoly solution of output and pricing, which ensures maximization of joint profits, though they do not formally collude. However, joint profit maximization via non-collusive action is not that simple. Various difficulties may arise in such action because it implies that firms have a good knowledge of the market demand curve and that they learn from their mistakes and realize that the ultimate consequence of alternative chain of adjustments to rivals' moves will be less profitable than sharing the monopoly profits equally with him. Further, it is assumed in Chamberlains' model that the oligopolists know fully the costs of production of their rivals, which enable them to arrive at a monopoly output and price which is in the best interest of all of them. Thus, unless all oligopolists have identical costs and demands, it seems impossible that the oligopolist will be able to reach monopoly solution, that is maximization of joint profits without collusion. It may be noted that even in a formal collusion, there is always incentive on the part of rival firms to cheat by undercutting price to increase their individual profits. In Chamberlains' model of oligopoly, without collusion, incentive for the firms to undercut price to increase their share of profit will be relatively more. Chamberlains' model also suffers from the defect of ignoring entry. It is a closed model. Due to the attraction of monopoly profits jointly earned by the existing firms, the new firms are likely to enter the industry. If entry does occur, it is not certain that the stable monopoly solution will ever be reached unless special assumptions are made concerning the behavior of the old firms and the new entrant. As shown in the figure, the demand curve has a kink at point E, reflecting the following behavioral pattern. If the entrepreneur reduces his price, he expects that his competitors will follow suit, matching the price cut, so that although the demand in the market increases, the shares of competitors remain unchanged. Thus, for price increases above P, the relevant demand curve is the section FE of the FF prime curve. The upper section of the kinked demand curve, that is at prices above P, has higher price elasticity than the lower part. The reason is that the firm believes that if it raises its price above P, other firms will not follow suit and it will therefore lose sales and much of its market share. On the other hand, the firm believes that if it lowers its price below P, other firms will follow suit because they will not want to lose their shares of the market. Due to the kink in the demand curve of the oligopolist, his MR curve is discontinuous at the level of output corresponding to the kink. The MR has two segments. Segment FA corresponds to the upper part of the demand curve, while the segment from point B corresponds to the lower part of the kinked demand curve. The equilibrium of the firm is defined by the point of the kink because at any point to the left of the kink, MC is below the MR, while to the right of the kink, the MC is larger than the MR. Thus, total profit is maximized at the point of the kink. However, this equilibrium is not necessarily defined by the intersection of the MC and the MR curve. The discontinuity between A and B of the MR curve implies that there is a range within which costs may change without affecting the equilibrium P and X of the firm. As shown in the figure, so long as MC passes through the segment AB, the firm maximizes its profits by producing P and X. This level of price and output is compatible with a wide range of costs. Thus, the kink can explain why price and output will not change despite changes in costs within the range AB defined by the discontinuity of the MR curve. The greater the difference of elasticities of the upper and lower parts of the kinked demand curve, the wider the discontinuity in the MR curves, and hence the wider the range of cost conditions compatible with the equilibrium price P and output X. There is only one case in which a rise in cost will most certainly induce the firm to increase its price when costs rise, despite the fact that the higher cost pass through the discontinuity of the MR curve. This occurs when the rise in costs is general. For example, imposition of a sales tax, and this affects all firms equally. Under these circumstances, the firm will increase its price with the certainty that the others in the industry will follow, since their costs are similarly affected. The point of the kink shifts upwards to the left and equilibrium is established at a higher price and a lower output as shown in the figure. The firm, via independent action, move closer to the point of joint profit maximization. Furthermore, there is a range through which demand may shift without a change in price, although quantity will change. If the demand curve is kinked, a shift in the market demand upwards or downwards will affect the volume of output, but not the level of price, so long as the cost passes within the range of the discontinuity of the new MR curve. In this case, the shift occurs along the same price as shown in the figure. As the market expands, the firm will not raise its price because its given cost continues to pass through the discontinuity of the new MR curve, and hence there is no incentive to change P, although output will increase. Now we will discuss the critical analysis of kinked demand curve model. Initially, many economists regarded the kinked demand curve model as a general theory of oligopoly, but empirical evidence raised doubts. Stigler, for example, examined 7 oligopolistic industries and found little evidence that rival firms were reluctant to match prices of other firms. Moreover, economists have criticized the model on more fundamental grounds. Although the kinked demand curve model explains price rigidity when cost and demand conditions change, it does not explain how the original price is determined. Critics claim that Sweezy's kinked demand model can be useful mainly as a description of price rigidity rather than as an explanation of it. To put it differently, the behavioral pattern implied by the kink seems quite realistic in the highly competitive business world, which is dominated by strongly competing oligopolists. However, this model does not explain the price and output decisions of the firms. It does not define the level at which price will be set in order to maximize profits. The King demand curve can explain the stickiness of prices in a situation of changing costs and of high rivalry. The King is the consequence of the uncertainty of the oligopolist and of their expectations that competitors will match price cuts but not price increases. However, it does not explain the level of the price at which the kink will occur. In other words, it says nothing about how firms arrive at the price at the kink and why they did not arrive at some different price. As the figure depicts two kinked demand curves with the kink occurring at different price level, Swayam's theory cannot define which of the two kinks, that is, which one of the two prices will materialize. The kinked demand hypothesis does not explain the height of the kink. Hence, it is argued that this is not a theory of pricing, but rather a tool for explaining why the price, once determined in one way or another, will tend to remain fixed. Let us consider an example to understand the effect of a change in marginal cost on the equilibrium output and price in the oligopoly industry with kinked demand. The kink demand curve is shown in figure 4.5. The demand curve is indicated as D and the corresponding discontinuous marginal revenue is given as MR. Suppose that the marginal cost is MC naught. As explained in the previous section, the equilibrium price and output is determined at the kink of the demand curve. From figure 4.5, it is clear that the equilibrium price is rupees 20 and the output is 30 units. It should be noted that at this equilibrium price and output, the firm's economic profit cannot be determined. This is because the marginal revenue is discontinuous in that section, suggesting that there is a range within which costs may change without affecting the equilibrium price and output of the firm. Now consider a shift in the marginal cost to MC1. What will happen to the equilibrium price and output? Clearly, the equilibrium price and output remains the same at rupees 20 and 30 units respectively. This is so because the kink in the demand curve and thus the equilibrium does not change with the shift in the marginal cost as indicated in the figure. This example illustrates that small changes in the marginal cost do not have any effect on the equilibrium price and output of the oligopoly firm. Let us now summarize what we have learnt in this module. Oligopoly is an industry structure characterized by a few large firms producing most or all of the output of some product. Economic decisions involve mutual interdependence and strategic behavior. Each firm considers how its action will affect its rivals and how they are likely to react. Chamberlain's oligopoly model suggests that a stable equilibrium can be reached in an oligopolistic market if the firms recognize their interdependence. Sweezy's kinked demand curve model assumes that firms in an oligopoly try to maintain their market share and that rival firms are unlikely to match another's price increase but may match a price fall. This is to say that rival firms within an oligopoly react asymmetrically to a change in the price of another firm. Due to this price rigidity, the firms have a kinked demand curve. The profit maximizing price and output is attained at the kink of the demand curve. Changes in variable cost may not lead to a rise or fall in the profit maximizing price and output. The theory has been criticized for not able to explain why firms start out at the equilibrium price and quantity. Many economists have argued that Sweezy's kinked demand model is useful mainly as a description of price rigidity rather than as an explanation of it.